Remember when a chrome skeleton walked out of fire and into cinema history? When Arnold Schwarzenegger became the face of unstoppable terror with barely more than a dozen lines of dialogue? The Terminator gave us "I'll be back," introduced us to Sarah Connor, and redefined what science fiction action could be. That red-eyed cyborg hunting a waitress through the neon-soaked streets of 1984 Los Angeles became one of the most iconic villains ever put on screen. But here's what most people don't know. The studio expected it to vanish after 2 weeks. Arnold was never supposed to play the killer. The film's most quoted line almost got rewritten because of an accent, and the biggest casting decision in action movie history happened completely by accident over lunch. What you're about to discover will change every scene you thought you knew. Today, we're counting down 20 weird facts you never knew about the Terminator. Stick around for number 1, because the lunch meeting that created this entire franchise started as a sabotage attempt. If you're new here, this is where we dig into the stories behind the movies you love, the ones the studios don't put on the poster. If you're into behind-the-scenes chaos, happy accidents, and Hollywood weirdness, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps more than you think. Number 20. When you're watching The Terminator, you probably never paid much attention to the voices you hear off screen. Sarah Connor's date who cancels via answering machine, the Tiki Motel manager who speaks to Sarah, then later answers the phone when the Terminator calls. They all sound vaguely familiar, right? That's because they're all the same person, James Cameron himself. The budget was so tight that hiring professional voice actors for minor off-screen parts felt like an unnecessary expense Cameron could eliminate personally. So he stepped behind the microphone and recorded all 3 roles himself. It's the kind of small, practical decision that defined this entire production. Every dollar mattered. Every corner that could be cut without compromising the vision got cut. Cameron wasn't just directing the movie. He was voicing characters, drawing concept art, and doing whatever it took to bring his vision to life on an impossibly small budget. These weren't vanity cameos, they were survival tactics. So the next time you watch The Terminator, listen carefully during those answering machine and motel scenes. That's the director's voice guiding Sarah Connor through her nightmare. These small budget-saving choices were everywhere on this production, and they add up to something bigger, a filmmaker willing to do absolutely anything to get his movie made. And that desperation, that hunger, that refusal to compromise, it shows in every frame. Number 19. You know that hauntingly atmospheric fog that rolls across the bridge as Sarah and Reese make their escape? The kind of eerie mist that makes the whole scene feel like a fever dream? Turns out, it wasn't created by the special effects team. It was genuinely toxic. In 1984, the city of Los Angeles was dealing with a Mediterranean fruit fly infestation. The city was conducting large-scale aerial and ground-level insecticide spraying campaigns to combat the crisis. Cameron's crew happened to be filming at the exact moment the fumigation crews were working in the area. So instead of spending money on fog machines and atmospheric effects, they simply rolled cameras while the city sprayed pesticides around them. That's guerrilla filmmaking at its finest. When you're working with a shoestring budget and a tight schedule, you use whatever the environment gives you. And if the environment happens to be giving you genuinely dangerous chemical fog that looks absolutely perfect for your sci-fi thriller, you roll with it. Think about that the next time you watch that bridge scene. That's not movie magic creating that ominous, toxic-looking atmosphere. That's actual insecticide drifting through the air while Linda Hamilton and Michael Biehn run for their lives. The city was literally fumigating Los Angeles, and Cameron turned it into one of the film's most memorable visual moments. Not bad for completely free special effects. Number 18. The Terminator theme is instantly recognizable. That relentless mechanical pulse, that metallic heartbeat, driving the tension forward. It's one of the most iconic film scores of the 1980s. But here's what makes it even more impressive. The entire thing was recorded in composer Brad Fiedel's garage. Fiedel didn't have access to a professional studio or a massive budget. He worked from his home setup using a sequential Circuits Prophet 10 synthesizer, an Oberheim O Beaksaw keyboard, and an EMU Emulator 1 sampler. Everything got recorded onto a 2-inch 24-track Otari tape machine set up in his garage. But the most iconic sound in the entire score, that metallic clanging heartbeat that defines the Terminator's presence, came from something even simpler. Fiedel took a cast iron skillet and struck it with a microphone. That's it. Kitchen cookware and a microphone. That low-budget improvisation became one of the most recognizable sonic signatures in cinema history. Every time you hear that mechanical pulse, you're hearing the sound of a frying pan getting hit in a residential garage. The entire legendary soundtrack was a DIY production born out of necessity and creativity. It worked, and it worked so well that decades later, you can play those first few notes and people instantly know what movie you're referencing. Sometimes, the best creative decisions come from having no money and being forced to improvise. Number 17. The tech noir nightclub scene is one of the most iconic sequences in the film. The flashing lights, the pulsing music, the chaos as the Terminator opens fire. It feels like a real Los Angeles nightclub caught in the middle of a nightmare. And that's exactly the problem Cameron's crew accidentally created. Tech noir wasn't a real club. Cameron's team found an empty property at 720 South Hill Street in downtown Los Angeles and transformed it into such a convincing venue that people walking by on the street genuinely thought a new club had opened. They had neon signs, a fully dressed bar, extras milling around outside. The whole setup looked so legitimate that real club goers started trying to pay their way in. The crew had to station people at the door to turn away confused patrons looking for a night out. But here's the other thing. Cameron didn't just create a convincing nightclub. He created a term that would define an entire genre. Tech noir was a phrase Cameron coined specifically for this film, blending the aesthetics of science fiction with the dark, cynical tone of film noir. That term later became recognized across the industry as a legitimate genre descriptor. So the next time you watch that scene, remember that every detail was fabricated from scratch in what was essentially an empty storefront, and it was convincing enough to fool real people actively looking for nightlife. That's production design at its finest. Number 16. Arnold Schwarzenegger became the face of this franchise. He became one of the biggest action stars in the world because of this role, and he did it with almost no dialogue. The Terminator has exactly 17 lines of dialogue, totaling approximately 58 words across the entire runtime. Think about that for a second. The character who defined Arnold's career and became one of cinema's most iconic villains speaks less than 60 words. But here's what makes it even better. The thing Hollywood had always considered Arnold's biggest liability, his thick Austrian accent, became his greatest asset. Cameron understood what the studios never did. That accent didn't make Arnold sound less believable. It made him sound exactly like what the Terminator was supposed to be: inhuman, mechanical, wrong. Cameron put it perfectly when he said, "If you wouldn't have this accent, if you wouldn't talk like a machine, I don't think we ever would have had a Terminator." The accent's strange, synthesized quality made the character feel genuinely otherworldly. Every line delivery had this uncanny, artificial quality that reinforced the fact that this wasn't a person. It was a machine wearing a person's face. Count the lines on your next viewing. You'll realize that the character's power is almost entirely physical and visual. What the studio saw as a career-ending weakness became the defining strength of one of cinema's greatest villains. Sometimes, what makes you different is exactly what makes you perfect. Number 15. That iconic red laser dot cutting through the darkness in the gun shop scene. The AMT hardballer long slide pistol with its futuristic targeting system. It became one of the film's most memorable visual elements and showed up prominently on the poster. But getting that laser sight to work in 1984 was a lot more complicated than you'd think. Ed Reynolds of Surefire was tasked with modifying the weapon to include a laser sight. There was just one problem. Semiconductor diode lasers small enough to mount on a handgun didn't exist yet. The technology simply wasn't there. So Reynolds had to get creative. He used a helium neon gas laser, which sounds impressive until you realize it required a bulky external power supply that had to be hidden off camera. Schwarzenegger had to manually activate the laser during takes, carefully timing it so the red dot appeared exactly when it needed to. And Reynolds, for all his engineering ingenuity and problem solving, received no cash payment for his work. His only compensation was promotional material featuring the film. So that cutting-edge weapon that made the Terminator look like he'd stepped out of the future required equipment far more complex than anything real police had access to at the time. It was genuine movie magic achieved through engineering improvisation. That red dot tracking across Sarah Connor required space-age technology just to make it look like technology from the future. The behind-the-scenes reality was way more complicated than what appeared on screen. Number 14. The endoskeleton walking shots are some of the most memorable images from the entire film. That chrome skeleton dragging itself forward with relentless mechanical precision. Those sequences were achieved through stop-motion animation using a 2-foot-tall puppet built by Doug Beswick at Fantasy II Film Effects. The puppet had over 100 individual aluminum parts that were painstakingly animated frame by Peter Kleinow. But here's the thing about stop-motion animation. It inherently looks slightly mechanical and stiff. That's just the nature of the technique. Cameron knew this would be a problem. So instead of trying to make the puppet move more naturally, he did something smarter. He made Arnold move more like the puppet. After the tanker explosion, Cameron wrote in a scene where the Terminator gets damaged and starts limping. That limp wasn't just story logic or character development. It was a creative solution to a technical constraint. If the endoskeleton puppet naturally moved with a stiff, lurching gait, then Arnold needed to match that movement. The damage to the character gave Schwarzenegger a narrative reason to adopt the same mechanical limp. Kleinow also placed a pane of glass smeared with Vaseline between the camera and the puppet to simulate natural motion blur. So that limp you see isn't just about the Terminator taking damage. It's an effects trick designed to hide the limitations of stop-motion puppet work. Story and technique working together perfectly. Number 13. Practical effects in the 1980s required a level of commitment that sometimes bordered on dangerous. Tom Woodruff Jr., working as part of Stan Winston's special effects team, volunteered his own hand for a very specific shot. The close-up of the Terminator's hand getting struck repeatedly with a lead pipe. They could have built a prosthetic. They could have used a dummy hand. But Woodruff offered his actual hand to sell the realism of the moment. So they pummeled it with a lead pipe, over and over, to get the shot Cameron needed. The repeated impacts caused nerve damage. Woodruff lost feeling in several fingers, permanently. And Cameron's response? He sent Woodruff a Christmas card that read, "Merry Christmas. Hope the feeling comes back to your fingers someday." That's the kind of dark humor that probably only makes sense when you're working on a film where everyone is pushing themselves past reasonable limits to achieve something special. Think about that the next time you watch that scene. A real person's hand took that beating and paid for it with permanent nerve damage. That's the level of dedication to practical effects that defined this era of filmmaking. The commitment was real, the risks were real, and sometimes the consequences were permanent. Woodruff gave up feeling in his fingers to sell one moment of violence in a low-budget sci-fi film. That's not just commitment, that's sacrifice. Number 12. The Terminator has this distinctive, gritty, nocturnal atmosphere. Los Angeles at night. Neon lights cutting through darkness, shadows everywhere. That look wasn't just an aesthetic choice. It was born out of necessity and executed through creative rule-breaking. 8 of the film's 10 weeks of principal photography were devoted to night shooting. Director of photography Adam Greenberg used handheld cameras because they were cheaper and more mobile than Steadicam rigs. But the bigger issue was that Cameron couldn't afford proper filming permits for most locations. So he relied on guerrilla filmmaking techniques he'd learned working with Roger Corman. Show up with minimal crew, set up fast, shoot quickly, leave before the police arrive. Cameron once woke Schwarzenegger up at 3 in the morning for an unscheduled reshoot, getting him back into full Terminator costume for an impromptu night shoot. For the final desert scene, a highway patrolman actually pulled up mid-take. Producer Gail Ann Hurd had to think fast and convince the officer they were just a UCLA student film project. He believed her and let them finish. So many of the film's most atmospheric shots were technically illegal to film. That nocturnal vision of Los Angeles was captured through creative rule-breaking and constant risk. Cameron was willing to bend or break whatever rules necessary to get his movie made. And that desperation, that refusal to let anything stop him, it shows in every frame. Sometimes, great art requires a little law-breaking. Number 11. James Cameron didn't just write and direct The Terminator. He brought his own detailed artwork to the table. When he approached Stan Winston's studio to build the endoskeleton, he didn't just describe what he wanted. He showed Winston his own hand-drawn paintings of the character. Several artists on Winston's team attempted to create alternative skull designs, trying to put their own spin on the concept, but they kept coming back to Cameron's original vision. Winston himself said it best. "Jim is an artist. He came to me and had the script, but more importantly, he had the drawings." The full-size puppet they built was constructed from epoxy, fiberglass, and steel. Then it was vacuum metallized, which is an electromagnetic process that gave it that distinctive metallic sheen. The finished puppet weighed approximately 100 pounds. It required 4 people just to hold and move it during filming. That weight, that bulk, That was a production complication caused entirely by the decision to use real steel components instead of lighter materials. But Cameron's artistic vision demanded authenticity. He could have compromised. He could have gone with something easier to work with. But every frame of that endoskeleton on screen traces directly back to drawings Cameron made himself. The director's artistic vision translated directly to screen with almost no compromise. When you see that chrome skeleton, you're seeing James Cameron's exact vision brought to life by Stan Winston's team. Pure collaborative filmmaking at its best. Alright, we're at the halfway mark and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 10, what's your favorite Terminator quote or moment? Drop it in the comments. If you're enjoying this, smash that like button and subscribe. It helps the channel grow. Number 10. Imagine being cast as the lead in what would become a franchise-defining role, then nearly losing it days before cameras roll. That's exactly what happened to Linda Hamilton. 1 week before principal photography began, Hamilton severely sprained her ankle. Some sources say she actually broke a bone and tore ligaments. Either way, it was bad enough that James Cameron seriously considered recasting her entirely. A sports doctor examined her and wrapped the foot in a running cast. He told Cameron, if she were playing for the Rams, she'd be in the game tomorrow. That vote of confidence was enough, but it meant completely rearranging the production schedule. Every running scene got pushed as late as possible to give Hamilton's ankle maximum recovery time. For the entire production, Hamilton's ankle was taped every single day. She spent most of the shoot in genuine physical pain, pushing through injury to deliver her performance. The ankle never fully healed during filming, so every running scene you watch, every moment where Sarah Connor is fleeing for her life, was filmed with Hamilton's ankle held together by medical tape and sheer determination. The performance came through real physical pain and constant injury risk. She could have been replaced, but she refused to give up the role. And that toughness, that refusal to quit, it shows in the character. Sarah Connor's strength came partly from Linda Hamilton's actual struggle. Number 9. Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't just show up on set and pretend to be a killing machine. He spent an entire month at shooting ranges every single day, drilling weapons handling until it became completely automatic. He practiced stripping, reassembling, and reloading weapons completely blindfolded, over and over until the movements required zero thought. He trained himself to never look down at his weapons during any handling sequence, never blink when firing. He practiced each individual movement up to 50 times until his muscle memory was perfect. The technique he developed was purely mechanical. His eyes always move first, scanning for targets. Then, his head follows. Arnold also made another interesting choice. He deliberately avoided socializing with Linda Hamilton and Michael Biehn on set. He believed the Terminator shouldn't form any kind of human connection with the people he was programmed to kill. So he kept his distance, stayed in character, remained cold and mechanical even between takes. The result was so convincing that Soldier of Fortune magazine, a publication that routinely tears apart Hollywood's laughably inaccurate weapons handling, actually singled out Arnold's performance for praise. Think about that. A magazine read by actual military professionals looked at the Terminator and said the gun work was legitimate. Every weapon movement you see on screen was rehearsed to absolute mechanical perfection. That's not acting. That's drilling. Months of preparation to create the illusion of inhuman precision. Number 8. After Arnold Schwarzenegger committed to playing the Terminator, filming got delayed by 9 months. Producer Dino De Laurentiis exercised a contract option that required Arnold to finish Conan the Destroyer first. For most directors, a 9-month production delay would be a disaster. For James Cameron, it became an opportunity. Rather than sit idle waiting for Arnold to become available, Cameron used that time to write 2 complete screenplays: Rambo, First Blood, Part 2, and Aliens. Both films came out in 1985 and 1986, respectively. Both became massive franchises. The Terminator delay directly enabled Cameron to launch his relationship with 20th Century Fox and create what became 2 of the biggest action franchises of the 1980s. And here's the best part. During the filming of Conan the Destroyer, Schwarzenegger was asked about his next project. His response, "Oh, some garbage movie I'm doing. Take a couple weeks." He had no idea. Nobody did. The Terminator was just another low-budget sci-fi film that would probably come and go without anyone noticing. So the production obstacle that could have killed the film's momentum instead gave Cameron time to write 2 other blockbusters. Without that delay, Aliens might never have been a Cameron film. Think about how different cinema would look if that delay hadn't happened. Sometimes the worst setbacks create the best opportunities. You just have to be willing to use the time productively instead of waiting around. Cameron did, and it changed everything. Number 7. The Terminator has this brilliant time loop paradox at its core. The future creates the past, which creates the future. But there was supposed to be one more piece to that puzzle. A crucial scene was actually filmed that would have completed the loop. Cyberdyne Systems technicians recovering the Terminator's crushed CPU chip and arm from the factory wreckage, revealing that the company destined to create Skynet obtained its technology from the very machine sent back to prevent it. It's a perfect narrative circle. It explains everything. And it was filmed. So why was it cut? Producer Gail Ann Hurd revealed the answer in August 2023 on social media. Financier John Daly of Hemdale Films insisted that his personal friends be cast in the scene instead of professional actors, not because they were qualified, just because they were his friends. Their performances were so terrible that Cameron had no choice but to scrap the entire sequence. Hurd wrote, "They insisted we use financier friends, not actors in this scene, which ruined it for us. So a pivotal scene that would have tied the entire story together got deleted, because a financier couldn't separate friendship from filmmaking." But here's the silver lining. Cameron didn't forget the idea. He recycled that entire concept into Terminator 2's storyline. The deleted scene became the foundation for the entire sequel. Number 6. Before the Terminator made him one of the most successful directors in Hollywood, James Cameron was living in his car, broke, desperate, but absolutely convinced he had something special. He showed his Terminator sketches and concept to Gail Ann Hurd, a fellow alumna from the Roger Corman School of Guerrilla Filmmaking. Together, they developed a 40-page scriptment. Cameron's agent read it and told him the idea was complete garbage. He urged Cameron to work on something else. Cameron fired his agent. Then he made a decision that would define his career. He sold the full screenplay rights to Gail Ann Hurd for $1. But it came with one non-negotiable condition. She could only produce the film if he directed it. The dollar wasn't about money, it was about control. It was about making absolutely certain that nobody could take this project away from him. They first pitched the project to Roger Corman himself. Even Corman had to be honest with them. "You need more money to make this a good movie than I'll be able to give you." That rejection pushed them toward Hemdale and Orion Pictures. Cameron later stated he still regretted selling the rights for $1. But at the time, he was desperate. The entire multi-billion-dollar franchise traces back to a $1 handshake deal made by a director living in his car. Sometimes you have to risk everything to get your shot. Number 5. James Cameron's original story outline for the Terminator actually featured 2 Terminators being sent back through time. The first was the conventional chrome endoskeleton we all know, but the second was something far more advanced. A shape-shifting liquid metal cyborg that couldn't be destroyed with conventional weapons. Sound familiar? That's because it eventually became the T-1000, the centerpiece villain of Terminator 2: Judgment Day, portrayed by Robert Patrick in 1991. But Cameron conceived that character for the original film. He just couldn't build it. As he put it, he was seeing things in his head that couldn't be done with existing technology. The CGI required to convincingly portray a liquid metal character simply didn't exist in 1983. 7 years later, advances in computer-generated imagery finally made the concept viable. Cameron pulled his shelved idea out and made it the foundation of the sequel. The studio, Orion Pictures, also submitted 2 creative notes during development. First, they wanted Cameron to add a cyborg dog as a companion for Kyle Reese. Cameron quietly ignored that suggestion entirely. Second, they asked him to strengthen the romantic relationship between Sarah and Reese. That one he accepted. So Terminator 2's most revolutionary character was originally conceived for the first film, but simply impossible to create at the time. Sometimes the best ideas have to wait for technology to catch up. Number 4. The most quoted line in action movie history almost didn't exist in its current form. James Cameron's original script had the line written as, "I'll come back." Simple, functional, forgettable. On set, Cameron made a change. He rewrote it to, "I'll be back." But Arnold Schwarzenegger immediately pushed back. He argued that the contraction "I'll" was difficult to pronounce with his Austrian accent. He thought "I will be back" would sound more mechanical. Cameron resisted. "Are you the scriptwriter now?" But then he explained his reasoning. "What makes it great is that you sound different than me or Charlie over there." The accent wasn't a problem. It was the entire point. Cameron rolled the camera and had Arnold deliver the line 10 different ways. They picked the best take. Cameron fully expected the line would only get a laugh on repeat viewings. He thought it was a throwaway moment. He was absolutely stunned when first-time audiences reacted to it immediately. In the Netflix documentary Arnold, Cameron admitted the moment wasn't meant to be significant at all. But here's the thing, that collaborative friction resulted in absolute perfection. Arnold wanted, "I will be back." Cameron wanted, "I'll be back." They compromised by filming it multiple ways and selecting what worked best. The most iconic one-liner in action movie history was a throwaway line that nearly became something completely different. Sometimes the best creative choices emerge from arguments, not agreements. Number 3. This one's documented history. Orion Pictures co-founder Mike Medavoy suggested O.J. Simpson for the role of the Terminator. He'd seen Simpson's athletic performances in those Hertz rental car commercials and thought he'd be perfect. Medavoy confirmed this himself in the 2014 Entertainment Weekly oral history, saying, "That did come out of my mouth." James Cameron and Gale Ann Hurd's reaction was immediate. "You've got to be kidding me." Cameron gave 2 reasons for rejecting the idea. First, Simpson was too likable. He was this likable, goofy, kind of innocent guy. Wrong energy entirely for a relentless killing machine. But the second reason was more uncomfortable. Cameron said, "I wasn't interested in an African-American man chasing around a white girl with a knife. It just felt wrong." Given what happened years later, that reasoning takes on deeply unsettling, ironic weight. Arnold Schwarzenegger later claimed that Cameron even painted concept art of Simpson as the Terminator before eventually switching to Arnold's face. Simpson was never formally cast. The suggestion never went beyond initial conversations. The Terminator was nearly played by a man who would later be convicted in a completely different kind of pursuit. The casting choice they made avoided what would have been deeply problematic optics for reasons nobody could have predicted at the time. Sometimes you dodge a bullet without even realizing it. Number 2. When James Cameron screened a rough cut of the Terminator for Orion Pictures executives in summer 1984, the reaction was devastating. Chairman Arthur Krim told executive Barbara Boyle, "You made exactly what I was afraid you'd make, an exploitation picture in the Corman style." Orion had just released Amadeus 5 weeks earlier. They didn't know what to do with a violent, low-budget sci-fi action film. The studio held exactly 1 press screening. Their head of marketing essentially declared the film dead on arrival. Gale Ann Hurd recalled their assessment. "They told us it was a down-and-dirty exploitation film. That word of mouth would be so bad we wouldn't be in theaters after the second weekend." The studio had zero faith. They expected the film to disappear completely after opening weekend. The Terminator premiered on October 26, 1984. It debuted at number 1 with $4 million at 1,005 theaters. It held the top spot for 2 consecutive weeks. It ultimately grossed $78.3 million worldwide against a $6.4 million budget, more than 12 times its production cost. In 2008, it was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. The studio expected a 2-week embarrassment. They got a franchise worth over $2 billion. Complete vindication of Cameron's vision and proof that studios don't always know what they have. Number 1. Arnold Schwarzenegger was never supposed to play the Terminator. Orion co-founder Mike Medavoy met Schwarzenegger at a party and pushed him for the hero role, Kyle Reese. James Cameron wanted nothing to do with it. Before the lunch meeting, Cameron told his roommate, "Do I owe you any money? Because I have to go pick a fight with Conan." His plan was to behave so badly that Arnold would walk away, letting Cameron claim creative differences. The meeting went sideways. Schwarzenegger couldn't stop talking about the Terminator, not Kyle Reese, the villain. He gave Cameron detailed notes on how the Terminator should behave, referencing Yul Brynner's killer robot in Westworld. He argued the actor would need to handle weapons blindfolded to seem mechanical, always scanning, never showing emotion. Cameron found himself sketching Arnold's face during the conversation. "I'm thinking he could be like a human bulldozer. He could be like a Panzer tank. It would just be different. But man, it would be powerful." When the check came, Arnold realized Cameron hadn't brought money. He graciously paid the bill. Cameron drove back to producer John Daly and said he wouldn't play Reese, but he'd make one incredible Terminator. Schwarzenegger was initially reluctant. His agent warned against villain roles, but Cameron convinced him with one sentence. "This movie is not about the hero. It's about the Terminator." The most iconic casting decision in action movie history happened because an actor accidentally pitched himself for the wrong role at a lunch he paid for. The Terminator changed science fiction and action cinema forever. It launched one of the most successful franchises in film history and made Arnold Schwarzenegger a global superstar, but none of it was guaranteed. The studio thought it would disappear in 2 weeks. The director sold the script for $1, while living in his car. The star wasn't supposed to play the villain. The most iconic line almost got rewritten. There were delays, injuries, illegal night shoots, and guerrilla filmmaking tactics everywhere. But somehow, every obstacle shaped the film into something greater than anyone imagined. Sometimes, the best creative decisions happen by accident. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this movie. And as always, we'll be back. We'll see you next time.